Hello and welcome to Wild Sounds, the film podcast. I am Kierston Drier here with my co-host today, Matthew Toffolo. And today, folks, we are continuing our mini-series on 10 films that changed cinematic history. And we are jumping in the way, way back machine, and we are going to talk about, that's right, Casablanca.
Yes, Casablanca in 1942 it came out. It was the winner of Best Picture from that year's at the Oscars. And I put down three reasons why this is one of the biggest movies that impacted cinema. Reason number one was that the way it impacted the Western world's perception of foreign affairs. It helped start a trend of where the U.S. interviews with foreign situations, which is funny now. And it kind of people were mostly Americans at the time in 1941, before Pearl Harbor, were against the war. They didn't want to be interviewed in the war. And this kind of movie was the first movie to really kind of mainstream movie to really show what's going on the other side of the world and what's kind of happening. So that's number one. Number two would be Rick, the main character, Rick, played by Humphrey Bogart. It was Hollywood's first rebel hero, the first bad boy. He's the kind of prototype to a new kind of America. So back then, generally speaking, there was kind of black and white characters where like the guy was either a bad guy or a good guy, or he was a more romantic interest or a non-romantic interest. And he was the first guy with kind of like layers, different kind of layers. Like at the first perception, we didn't think that he was that good of a guy. And of course, he becomes the greatest man in cinema history for what he did at the end. He like gives up the love of his life for his country, a country that he can't even go to. So that's number two. And number three is the emphasis on individualism. There's a sexual awakening happening in America, and it's basically a kind of escapism. That's the metaphor and the theme of Casablanca. So kind of giving these themes in the movies, in the mainstream movies, that these three kind of big themes that we never really seen before in movies. And it just became this, like, it kind of blew up that way because we did usually, like, people just never seen characters or settings or situations like this before. So that's my kind of big top three of why it kind of changed cinema.
Yeah, totally. Let's dive into that a little bit. You had a couple of really interesting points. One is that the idea that, Rick is an everyman, so to speak, he actually like embodies America. Like, he is, he's a dreamer. He's an idealist that's been made cynical by, like, the harsh realities of life, right? Which kind of embodies, like, the spirit of America at that time on the brink of war. Like, they're idealists. They don't necessarily want to go to war, but they're torn. They're torn between duty to country and loyalty to the bigger picture, and the individualism that they want to be, like, the uniqueness that they want to be within themselves, right? Like, does he choose his love? Does he act like an idealist, a dreamer, a romantic, and choose to be the individual who follows his heart? Or does he make the really hard choice and do what's better for the nation, for the people, for the country? And ultimately, it's about a dreamer, like, torn between dreams and disillusionment and reality and choice. You also talk about the sexual awakening, which is really interesting. I have a really interesting point on this one. So, his love interest is married, and she falls for him because she believes she's been widowed. And when she finds out that her husband is still alive, it's quite the scandal, but it's not her fault. She is an adulteress, but in a completely innocent way. She believes that her husband has died. She doesn't fall in love because she is cheating on her husband or being unfaithful. She falls in love out of innocence. So she's able to transgress this taboo in, like, one of the socially acceptable ways at the time, right? Which makes it okay for us to indulge in the fantasy of a married woman falling in love with someone else while she's still married, and then that plot thickens. And another thing is that Casablanca is full of melodrama. It's a classic noir film, but it's also absolutely overrun with cliche. But there's this famous line that one cliche makes us roll our eyes, but 100 cliches makes us cry. Like, it's so well put together, so stylized, so ahead of its time, or actually really on the pulse of the nation for its time. Not necessarily ahead. It was right in the moment when it happened, that the over-the-top melodrama worked so well that it didn't feel melodramatic. It felt like just a passionate, heady story.
Well, it's a lot of, like, people talking in a room and then going to another room and people talking into a room. So it's not surprising that this was a play. This was a play before the movie came out. So this was this was the Warner Brothers after Pearl Harbor wanted to get into the war game, I guess, in their movies. Like Pearl Harbor happened, and they just wanted to make some sort of war movie, and they saw this play on off Broadway called Everybody Comes to Rick, and they actually paid $20,000 for the unproduced work of the screenplay, and of course they put it into their machine, the Warner Brothers machine, where there's like back in the day where they just had like 100 screenwriters sitting in one room typing on a typewriter, and they just went around the room and they kind of wrote this script, which is funny, but at the same time it's not really, there's not much, there's a movie about a lot of action going on, that they're talking about a lot of action going on in the world, but they're just kind of like everybody's just having a conversation, right? So it's sort of like it feeds on the melodrama. It's very much kind of like a soap opera where it's just you know what I'm saying? Like it's that kind of, but it works. It works really well. So
it's a soap opera, but it's a soap opera done so well, and it's so engaging, and it's so of the moment that people don't care that it's a soap opera. All they care about is the story, and really the big overarching themes behind that story. Who's right? Who's wrong? Which lover do you fight for? Do you choose yourself and your heart in that moment, and the romance and the being swept up in the passion of the time? Or do you look a little bit farther, make the harder choice, choose duty, the abstract, choose the country? And also, this is a piece that, like, I have a suspicion that this is why Wizard of Oz, which came out a couple years before, right before the 39, wasn't like bombed at the box office, because it talks about, you know, at the very end, the kind of the theme stated in the thesis is like, if you're worried about, you know, seeking adventure, just don't look any farther than your own backyard. Stay home, and there's adventure here in the backyard. And there's that wasn't what the nation was hungry for. The nation was hungry for the hard choices. The like, do we go out? Do we venture into the great unknown and risk self for country? How much sacrifice is required of us now in the heat of this moment? And Casablanca just throws that into sharp focus.
Well, it's a film about you have to make a choice. So the here Everybody Comes to Rick's, like his bar. It's like in Switzerland. It's a neutral place, so nobody talks politics. Everybody's welcome, and in the end of and that's the beginning. So Rick is a neutral guy. Like he doesn't want to make a choice on anything. He doesn't want to have a ideology about what's happening in the world. But in the end, we all have to make a choice, right? Like this is very much an anti-Nazi film, which is easy to say now, but back in the 30s, like, you had like Charles Lindbergh, one of the most famous people in America, who kind of believed in Hitler's nationalism, and like, I'm not going to compare what's happening now with what happened with Hitler, but there is some similarities where you have to kind of like, you can't stay neutral, like especially when there's divisive things going on, especially a war and people like Hitler's army coming to power. You have to make choices. In the end, Rick has to think the macro. Like, it's micro where you're idealist and you're thinking about yourself. He's going to pick the love of his life. But the macro is like, you have to think about the world and like what is really happening. And in the end, he's got to do what he has to do to be the best person he can be, and that's making a choice to help make the world a better place, right? So
he also has this great line where he says, like, you're gonna regret it one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day and for the rest of your life, which is a fantastic line that indicates, like, when you make those hard choices, the ramifications, like, it speaks to the moment that he's trying to save the love of his life, but he's also talking about, like, he knows that whatever choice they make, he will always wonder what if, but the choice he's making now is the lesser of two evils. And it also has the least likelihood to punish you later, right? To make that grander choice, and the choice for, you know, really, he's making if he is America, if Rick embodies America, him choosing duty and the world over the individual is him saying, like, the best thing we can do right now is be brave and not selfish.
At the same time, that's what a lot of Americans had to think about at that time in 1942. Like, you can't be selfish anymore. You have to think about your country because you're going to go to war and you have to sacrifice. It's not about making money for your family. It's about doing what's best for the country, right?
Absolutely. And like, that's the interesting thing here, because it's a really hard choice to make in the heat of the moment. It's a hard choice not in the heat of the moment. And it's you can make an argument that, no, you should follow love, like, of course, and there's so many reasons why, and like, war isn't a pretty thing at all, and why are we supporting this? And like, that's a cultural sort of maturity that people have been dealing with every time there's a war. But in that moment, while the world was rallying in the wake of Pearl Harbor, this message rung and really hit the core of an entire population.
And everybody has to come out of the bar eventually. Everybody has to come out of hiding, no matter what. Like, you can escape for as long as you want, maybe, but usually you get pulled out of that escapism, and no matter what, people have to face reality. And that's sort of the metaphor of Rick's place, is that, yeah, you can go have a drink, you can go have a good time, but you can tie one on, but to say it, eventually you're going to have to come out of that bar and like face life.
Yeah, you can run, but you can't hide. And ultimately, everyone grows up, and with growing up comes responsibility to not just yourself, but to others. So yeah, that's what I think the philosophy behind Casablanca is, and why Casablanca changed cinema, is because it established just a whole sort of coming of age emotionally, and noir cinema for sure. This falls into noir cinema, and because of its strong popularity when it came out, like, it would affect for years and years to come. There are nods to Casablanca, from the low key lighting to like. To the hairstyles in dated films, or to films that are harkening back to a certain time. There were trend-setting moments in this film that would carry on for generations to come.
All right, let's talk about some fun things. I'll give you some fun facts about this film.
All right.
Humphrey Bogart, who was 5'8" at the time, had to wear platform shoes to play alongside Ingrid Bergman, who was around 5'11". So he had to wear a platform. It's very common, I guess, in a lot of shorter actors. It's Al Pacino, Tom Cruise, they kind of ring a bell. Sylvester Stallone, who I met and is a lot shorter than I ever imagined. And so that's kind of funny that he had to kind of wear platform shoes. Like, she's much taller than him is. Humphrey Bogart really didn't even want to make the movie. And this is the kind of role that kind of defined his legendary career. He didn't find the dialogue believable. But this is the time where the actors were contractually obligated. They're signed to the studio. So he had a 10-year contract with Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers would, he had certain days that he was allowed to work. I think 150 days out of the 365 days a year. And no matter what script that they told him to work on, he had to work on. So it wasn't like now where you can pick and choose. So that's kind of funny, where he didn't even want to work on the film that kind of defined his career. We know that Michael Curtis directed this film, but he was supposed to direct the movie Sergeant York, and Howard Hawks was supposed to direct Casablanca, and they were both contractually obligated to Warner Brothers too. And supposedly, this is like an urban legend that they said they had lunch one time and they actually switched scripts. So Howard Hawks ended up doing Sergeant York, and Michael Curtis ended up doing Casablanca, which he won Best Director for. So there's little fun facts.
Awesome. I wonder if the first director was upset about that. Like, that could have been my script.
Yeah, but at the same time, Howard Hawks has had a pretty fantastic career as well.
Mm-hmm.
One last note that I think that there's a rumor in the industry too that Madonna wanted to remake Casablanca. She wanted to produce it, and she put a lot of money into helping produce it. And she was going to play Ilsa, and Ashton Kutcher was going to play Rick.
Really?
Yeah, and let's just say the movie got squashed. It's like now, like, as we're doing this podcast, they're doing A Star Is Born with Lady Gaga and what's that gentleman? That other gentleman Anyway, so basically,
someone will write in and tell us.
Yeah, Bradley Cooper. So they're doing a remake of that. But that's like, I thought that movie shouldn't be remade. I know they remade it a few times over, but Casablanca is one of those films that I don't think can be remade. I think it's untouchable.
I mean, people tried to remake Psycho, and like that didn't work out. Like, it happens. Like, they sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But this is a classic, such a classic that it might forever be in the canon of films that cannot be remade. And one day someone will try, and they might do a great job for the time. But it's still Casablanca.
Would you pay $13 to see Ashton Kutcher playing Rick? It would be funny.
Mean, I would, because he's a heartthrob.
Really? He's a heartthrob? Okay.
Oh, of course he is.
Okay, I didn't know. I knew he was. He's kind of like that goofy, good-looking guy, I guess, right?
That's totally my type. But yeah. I also like goofy and good-looking is 100% my thing. But if you look at, like, just to go on record, I've had a crush on Ashton Kutcher since, like, That 70s Show. Well, before, when I was way too young to have crushes. I was like, that boy is pretty. I like him. So yeah, all the way back to there. Yeah, okay. I've been following him. Him and Mila Kunis are great too. Yeah, they're, like, not in a creepy way. Like, I don't know where he lives or anything. He's just, yeah. And Mila Kunis and him are great together. And oh, Mila Kunis is so pretty. They just have a great life. I wish them all the best. I hope they have wonderful, wonderful lives.
Okay. I've never met him, so I don't know if he's a prick or not. I have no idea. Fun
fact about me: the minute I find out that one of my celebrity crushes is taken, I just like crush the crush. I'm like, oh well, they're taken. Can't like them anymore. And I know, like, why would I do that to myself? If fantasies are free, nope. If you're married or got a girlfriend, I'm just gonna stop thinking about that. Fun fact.
Okay.
Yeah, so I put my Ashton Kutcher fantasies away a long time ago. But still, he's so pretty. I would totally watch him play Rick.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So you got anything else on Casablanca? Now that the audience knows way too much about
But she was going to play Ilsa, and he was going to, like, isn't there, like, an age difference? But I guess that's, like, I don't know. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Just
I think that actually would be kind of cool. Like, I'd be interested in seeing, like, the older female character. I don't know if there's a substantial age difference in the original, but I'd be interested in seeing if we're going for the philosophical, like, embodiment of America in Ashton Kutcher and Rick's character, then I'd be interested in seeing a young, gorgeous, idealistic youth being the idealistic America, and an older woman playing the ingenue. That'd be an interesting spin.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. All right, well, if you would like to write it to us and talk to us about what you think, who your celebrity crushes are, who you think would be a great Rick in the remake of Casablanca, you can find us on Twitter at WildSoundPod, or you can write me and Matt on Twitter at Matthew Toffolo, Toffolo, or at Kierstonator, Kierstonator. You can also send us an email at podcast@wildsoundpodcast, and you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at wildsoundpod. You want to missing anything, Matt?
No, that's it. By the way, there's a 16 year age difference between Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman.
You were just Googling that, weren't you?
He was born in 1899. She was born in 1915. So.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I was caught in a double standard here, where I was like saying that they didn't match up, Madonna and Ashton Kutcher, but there's a 16 year age difference between the male and the female character. So
how fascinating is that? I actually appreciate the film more now, knowing that's such a substantial age difference, and from a philosophical perspective, that changes the story too. Oh, cool. Well, we're going to have to do a two-parter on this one, and we'll talk about it when we hear more about the remake coming up. All right, that's all we got for Casablanca, Matt. What's next?